today is George Roach, the CEO of Premier African Minerals. George, it's good to be catching up. A couple of bits of news to talk about here, but how are you doing, first of all?
Sure. Mark, thank you very much indeed. I'm fine.
Good.
I think, as I've mentioned before, we went through a bit of a rough period in the latter part of last year, but at the moment, very much looking up.
Good. Okay, that's good to hear. Well, the first bit of news that came out this week, of course, was the announcement of the AGM, which will be held in country. So the first question I have is, I wonder if you could just confirm whether the share consolidation that's been proposed would occur before any share issuances under Resolution 2 and 3. And just clarify if that 27 billion and then 10 billion shares are pre or post consolidation figures.
That is pre-consolidation.
Okay.
Okay, so that would be form part of if they're issued. I mean, I think that the disapplication of preemptive rights and the issuance of the share are two different things. So there has been no issue of shares. There can't be until such time as we've gone through the general meeting, and then we will see what we need to issue.
Okay.
Obviously we would issue whatever was needed or as little as we can, rather than just try and do a huge lump sum placement of it all.
Okay. But the idea would be that any placing that does indeed occur would be before consolidation. So new shares
Correct.
would come on and then you would consolidate.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. And that 37 billion, then, if they are all indeed issued, so that would, if they're all issued, would mean pretty significant dilutions at over 50%. So as you say, you don't want to do them all at once, but I mean, how can you adopt sort of perhaps a phased approach to minimise dilution here, but maybe potentially at a higher share price after demonstrating Zulu's producing capabilities?
I think that's probably the most significant of all, and it really is going to be a case of how now that we have had some funds from the last placement that we did, and hopefully more from this, that we can get to that point much quicker, obviously, than we would ever have got there without funding. And I mean, it's worth noting that the time frame from the moment of unveiling money to the point when we believe the plant will be fully assembled and can really go through the optimization process of around about 3 months, that time frame hasn't moved. It's pretty much the same as I was talking about in I think July, August last year. The only thing that has moved is the date on which we've been able to access the money to go ahead with it.
Sure. Okay. And just finally on that point then, I'm just thinking from an order of things. I think in the past I've tended to seen when a company looks to consolidate, the consolidation's done, it sort of reduces the shares in float, and then they might look to place if they need the cash. I mean, I suppose it doesn't really matter which way around it's done, but from sort of a psychological point of view or an optics point of view to place a lot of shares and then consolidate, is it the best way to do it? I don't know, for shareholders.
When you asked the question initially, I'd looked at it from the point of view that there may be a concern that this 27 billion was after consolidation. And on that basis, it would represent potential for a massive dilution.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was what I wanted to clear. I'm sorry, that was where my focus was. Look, I think what matters is that we understand correctly what it is. I think that's what really matters. I must also say, I've personally, and I think it's known, I'm not necessarily a supporter of consolidations, but I think that the quantum of shares was really huge. And I think that a 10-to-1 should not have any adverse impact on the liquidity that the company has. So those are the big concerns that I had. And I think that our brokers will probably agree that where we are at the moment is the correct number.
Okay. You do need to consolidate at some points in time, of course. I've seen them in the past where they consolidate, and of course the share price rises to reflect the new number. But then it almost seems to find from its new height space to come back down again. So that's why I was sort of querying
No.
the order here. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I mean, it's just another factor that one needs to deal with. I'm talking from a share trading perspective. One just needs to be aware of it. But once one is over that initial period, it'll be well publicised, well spoken about, etc., etc. I think we still have to get a BVI legal opinion and various other things. So we're really seeking the consent of shareholders at this time.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. The other bit of news, of course, significant that's come out recently is your announcement of effectively stepping down, a change of leadership, a change of management within 3 months. Now, of course, we've discussed this a few times. We've discussed your desire to step down as CEO once Zulu was producing, and now, of course, that's been announced. And it's 31st of August is the deadline. So I guess the 1st of September you are free from your current role. I mean, were there any specific factors, perhaps the CanMax agreement on the 1st of April there, that extension, or indeed Glencore's involvement that have prompted this decision to be announced now as opposed to, let's say, in 3 months' time when the plant's running?
Look, I believe that the plant and these various things that we're doing, the secondary flotation plant and so on, I believe all of this will be in and done prior to that date. I think that's the first thing that I want to say. And I've always said that I was prepared to remain and be here and to see that through, subject to everybody being happy that I should. There have been many questions raised and thrown at me. I've had all sorts of accusations over a period. I think that the company needs new leadership at this time. I think that it is an appropriate time for somebody to come in at that time when we do, or when I believe anyway, that we have now got this plant in its initial phase. And I think just bear in mind that the development of Zulu and the expansion into all the byproduct is going to require a whole lot more work and other additions and so on and so forth as we go forward. But at least we will have a situation where it's running, where there's a proper mine operating and so on. And I think that that's as appropriate a moment for me to step back from the company. I think that internally, I mean, our own board has its own views. I think that from a CanMax perspective, they are probably going to feel more comfortable. And I have no issues with that at all. I think that my views at the time of the 21st of December agreement on the modifications were pretty clear, and that isn't where I was. However, we have remained, we've worked our way through it, and we got to the point now where I think it is appropriate. Okay. Where at least I think I'm handing over at a time when somebody can walk in and say, this is pretty well complete.
Yeah, okay. And I know that's what you wanted to do. So this really is just a formality. This now really sets those wheels in motion. Can you share any detail? I mean, I guess you can't name any names. I'd love to know some names if there's some in the running here. But if you can't share any names at this point, what about perhaps the profile or the selection process that you're looking at for the successor?
Well, I can't share names at the moment. I will say that there is work going on in the background in regard to that, and I don't think it's going to take long before we're going to be able to say something. In terms of selection process, I think it's somebody who's got to be as doggedly determined and obstinate as I've been. If they're going to continue and make this thing work and work their way through. And it's got to go beyond Zulu. It should go to RHA, whatever we're going to do with RHA, and the other opportunities that exist. So I think that's probably the most significant thing. In terms of technical capability, I think that there probably should be a process engineer of some kind, with obviously plant operating and so on experience. Could well be a chemical engineer. I'm not quite sure. But I think that it's in that kind of direction that we will be looking and what we will look to find.
Okay, and that process is well on the way. There's a pool of candidates that's well on the way. Okay, and you've got that
Absolutely.
3 months effectively to do that. You did seem confident earlier when you were answering some questions that the plant would be ready. You can hand it over as an operating plant. So you're sounding confident. So I mean, how do you plan on getting the plant producing within 3 months and having a nice smooth handover here? What's left to be done? Is it all going to happen in nice order?
Yeah. No, so Mark, in my view, the only factor at this time that I'm conscious of that could delay that is access to money. There's been detailed study work done last year. It's published, et cetera, that gives us comfort and confidence in the material's ability to float adequately, and so on and so forth. We've identified, or Enprotec has identified what they believe is needed to optimize their float cells to give us recovery and grade. That's paid for and is under construction in Bulawayo. So it's not even got to go through a board. It'll go from the manufacturers in Bulawayo straight to site, and that's fairly close by. In terms of the secondary float plant, we have commenced with the civil work. We've paid a significant amount so far towards the civils that are being done, and the civils are anticipated to complete probably in 4 to 5 weeks from now, maybe a little bit longer, but that's pretty well the timeline. And the plant that will go onto it is already in Zimbabwe. We expect to do an inspection of that plant physically in the next week or so. But we don't really see that once the civils are finished, that there's a lot of work in integrating the plant. We are satisfied that we have enough utilities. We are satisfied that it's an easy connection to raw water, to tailings water, and so on and so forth. So on that basis, on the work that we've done, on understanding what we have to do, what we have to spend, provided the money is available as we need it, I don't see that there's going to be much of an opportunity for this thing to exceed the end of August.
Okay.
In fact, I'd like to see it much earlier.
Okay. So the funding requirements are the main risk factor involved here, and that was spelled out in the it was the AGM announcement that had your budget there that you needed. So just on that as a final point, then of course you're seeking that approval at the AGM. What can you do before the AGM to demonstrate a bit more, give a bit more confidence to shareholders they can actually pass that resolution and indeed perhaps be prepared to back the company, let's say, one last time to get this over the line? I mean, can you do any kind of can you do any testing, prior to demonstrate, just to give a bit more confidence to shareholders?
Well, we're actually doing a bit more of that anyway, and an example of it is that I've tried to be even more circumspect, let's use that word, in terms of equipment and plant and what people say. And I've called for a whole lot more test work to be done by the Chinese company that is supplying that float plant and our laboratory on matching material in different places and so on. We're not going to get a process guarantee from them, but I have it already in a form that I suppose is acceptable, but I want it more precise. I wanted the undertakings and clear understandings from them that we're all satisfied, that they are completely satisfied that our material will float at the recoveries required and at the grades in their plant. Okay. They've said this to me already, but we're doing a lot more work on that. So before that plant moves onto site, I will have gone the next step in terms of that.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear that you've had that verbally. You want it a bit more formally, and then that can be communicated to market, can it? Again, just to give a bit more confidence.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will communicate this to market as we go forward at each step. I'm due at Zulu tomorrow. I'm flying up very early tomorrow morning. I want to go and have a look at where we are with the civils. All the mobilization for the civils is done. I believe that most of the materials have been delivered to site and so on. But I want to meet with the man who is supervising it on behalf of the contractor. I want to go through our project schedule, timelines, and so on. I want to be completely satisfied that everything is there. And so that I will be doing. So I'll be in a constant check mode, if you want to call it that.
Okay. Well, I'm sure if you can share any pictures through the social media, shareholders will appreciate to see what's going on. And maybe we can catch up, after you've been there a few days, just to get the lay of the land. But for now, George Roach, thank you very much again for your time.
Pleasure. Thank you, Mark.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stockboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.